In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Global food prices reached their highest levels in recorded history within months. The mechanism: Russia and Belarus produce approximately 40% of global potash. Russia produces approximately 22% of global ammonia. Ukraine produces approximately 15% of global corn exports. The Green Revolution had made the global food system extraordinarily productive and extraordinarily dependent on a specific supply chain, whose disruption by one military action produced food insecurity across 50 nations simultaneously. The miracle and the vulnerability are the same mechanism seen in different conditions. This episode examines both. Norman Borlaug is the least famous person who ever saved approximately 1 billion lives. Born in Iowa in 1914, trained as a plant pathologist at the University of Minnesota, he spent 15 years in Mexico developing high-yield dwarf wheat varieties that would transform global food production. His specific insight: traditional wheat varieties grew tall, and when synthetic nitrogen fertilizer increased grain head weight, the stems collapsed before harvest. Shorter stems could support heavier grain heads. The dwarf wheat variety that Borlaug developed at Summit in Mexico could yield 2 to 3 times more grain per hectare than traditional varieties. When combined with fertilizer, irrigation, and pesticide inputs, the combination changed the world. India's food crisis in 1966 was acute and documented. The country imported approximately 11 million tons of American grain under PL 480 emergency food aid, the largest single food aid shipment in history. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi cut government spending to fund wheat imports. American ships queued in Indian ports. Some American analysts believed famine in the 1970s was inevitable, regardless of food aid. The specific turning point: India's agriculture minister, Ms. Swaminathan, persuaded Gandhi to import 18,000 tons of Borlaug's Mexican dwarf wheat seed. The 1968 harvest, the first full season with the new varieties under irrigation and fertilizer, produced a yield increase so extraordinary that India lacked sufficient storage facilities for the grain. India's wheat production grew from approximately 11 million tons in 1966 to approximately 45 million tons by 1979. Pakistan achieved similar transformation. The Philippines achieved rice self-sufficiency within a decade of introducing IR8, the International Rice Research Institute's high-yield variety developed by scientist Henry Beechell. Mexico, where Borlaug had done his foundational research, had already achieved wheat self-sufficiency by the early 1960s. The Green Revolution's specific geographic achievement: the most densely populated parts of the developing world, South Asia and Southeast Asia, avoided the mass famine that Malthusian analysis of the 1960s predicted. The Nobel Committee awarded Borlaug the Peace Prize in 1970. His acceptance speech warned that the reprieve was temporary without addressing the underlying structural conditions. The Green Revolution's yield gains were not possible without synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, and synthetic nitrogen fertilizer was not possible without the Haber-Bosch process, developed by Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch in Germany between 1909 and 1913. The Haber-Bosch process converts atmospheric nitrogen, which plants cannot absorb directly, into ammonia through a high-pressure, high-temperature reaction with hydrogen derived from natural gas. Approximately half of all nitrogen atoms in the human body today pass through a Haber-Bosch reactor. The process requires approximately 1 to 2% of global energy consumption annually. It supports approximately 50% of global food production. It is the single most important chemical process in human history, and it depends entirely on the continuous availability of natural gas at affordable prices. The specific fossil fuel dependency of the Green Revolution's agricultural system is the episode's most consequential contemporary relevance, because the energy transition that the 21st century requires intersects directly with the agricultural system that the 20th century built. Producing 1 ton of nitrogen fertilizer requires approximately 33 gigajoules of energy, almost entirely from natural gas. Global fertilizer production consumes approximately 1 to 2% of global energy and contributes approximately 1 to 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing this dependency requires either replacing natural gas with green hydrogen in the Haber-Bosch process, currently being piloted but not at scale, or developing crop varieties that fix their own nitrogen from the atmosphere, as legumes do. Both transitions are decades away from replacing the fossil fuel-derived fertilizer that currently feeds approximately half the global population. The Green Revolution's irrigation requirement created the world's most consequential environmental problem that most people have never heard of: aquifer depletion. The high-yield varieties that Borlaug developed required controlled water availability that rainfall alone could not guarantee in most production regions. Irrigation from surface water and groundwater made consistent yields possible. In the Punjab, the specific heartland of the Green Revolution's South Asian success, farmers have been pumping groundwater for irrigation since the 1960s. The water table has been falling by approximately 60 centimeters per year in some Punjab districts. At current extraction rates, some Punjab aquifers are projected to be functionally exhausted within 30 to 40 years. The region whose irrigation enabled the Green Revolution is slowly running out of the water that made it possible. The Ogallala Aquifer, which underlies approximately 450,000 square kilometers of the American Great Plains, from South Dakota to Texas, is the world's largest known aquifer and the specific water source for approximately 30% of American groundwater irrigation. It is being depleted at rates between 10 and 15 times faster than natural recharge in its most exploited southern sections. The specific projection, at current extraction rates, large sections of the southern Ogallala could be functionally exhausted within 25 to 50 years. The American Great Plains, the world's largest and most productive dryland farming system, depends on an aquifer that is running out. The Green Revolution's success in the United States, like in Punjab, extracted the resource that made it possible faster than the resource can renew itself. Norman Borlaug's original high-yield wheat varieties were developed with public funding, USAID, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and were distributed to developing countries freely. The seed was a public good. The Green Revolution's first generation, no patents, no royalties, no licensing fees. The subsequent generation, dramatically different. Monsanto's development of herbicide-resistant varieties, Roundup-ready soybeans, Roundup-ready corn, introduced the specific model of proprietary seed genetics requiring annual license fees. Farmers who had historically saved seed from their harvest for the next year's planting could no longer legally do so with patented varieties. The consolidation of the global seed industry through mergers and acquisitions producing DowDuPont, Bayer Monsanto, and ChemChina, Syngenta, has concentrated control of approximately 60% of the global commercial seed supply in 3 corporations. The CRISPR gene editing revolution, with its specific ability to precisely edit crop genetic sequences at a fraction of the cost of traditional genetic modification, has created the most consequential new chapter of the seed ownership debate. CRISPR-edited crops can produce disease resistance, drought tolerance, and yield improvements without introducing foreign genetic material, potentially qualifying as non-GMO under existing regulatory frameworks. The specific question, does CRISPR editing of crop genetics produce a public good or a private one? The patent landscape for CRISPR agricultural applications is actively contested. The Broad Institute, the University of California, and multiple corporate entities have competing patent claims. The technology that could produce the next generation of yield improvements has already been enclosed in a patent dispute before a single farmer has planted its products. The landscapes that the Green Revolution transformed, and that it now threatens through aquifer depletion and soil degradation, are among the most extraordinary agricultural environments on Earth. The Punjab, meaning land of 5 rivers in Persian, is the specific geographic heartland of South Asian civilization and the specific landscape most transformed by the Green Revolution. Its wheat fields at harvest, the specific warm gold of one of the world's most productive agricultural regions. The Indus Valley Civilization, one of the earliest complex societies on Earth, developed in this landscape 4,000 years before the Green Revolution arrived. The Punjab's agricultural productivity is visible from satellite as a specific vivid green rectangle in the otherwise brown tan of the South Asian subcontinent's semi-arid landscape. The rice paddies of Southeast Asia, the specific agricultural landscape of the Green Revolution's second theater, are one of the most visually extraordinary cultivated environments on Earth. The Banao rice terraces of the Philippines, carved into the Cordillera mountain range 2,000 years ago by the Ifugao people, represent the human agricultural achievement that preceded the Green Revolution's technology. The specific human labor of building and maintaining terraced mountain agriculture across 2,000 meters of elevation. They are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Green Revolution's rice variety transformed lowland Philippines agriculture within a decade of its 1966 introduction. The mountain terraces, whose hand cultivation remained economically unviable for the new varieties, face abandonment as younger generations leave for urban employment. The Green Revolution's success in the lowlands contributed to the traditional terraces' decline in the highlands. The Green Revolution's most consequential geographic failure is sub-Saharan Africa, the region that the original revolution largely bypassed and where food insecurity remains most acute in 2026. The specific reason, the Green Revolution's high-yield varieties required irrigation and synthetic fertilizer inputs that were economically and infrastructurally unavailable to most sub-Saharan African smallholders, farming, rain-fed land. The new varieties, without controlled water and fertilizer inputs, did not reliably outperform traditional varieties in the variable rainfall conditions of sub-Saharan agriculture. The revolution that prevented famine in South Asia reached approximately 600 million sub-Saharan Africans, only partially, and the specific populations most vulnerable to food insecurity in 2026 are concentrated in the rain-fed smallholder farming regions that the original revolution did not reach. The Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA, launched in 2006 with funding from the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, represents the most sustained attempt to replicate the original Green Revolution success in sub-Saharan Africa. AGRA's approach, developing improved seed varieties adapted to African conditions, providing fertilizer subsidies, and building market infrastructure for smallholder farmers. After approximately 15 years and approximately $1 billion of investment, AGRA's results have been contested, some studies showing meaningful yield improvements in specific crop country combinations, others showing disappointing progress against food security indicators in agri-focused countries. The African Green Revolution is proving harder to achieve than the Asian one, partly because African agricultural diversity is far greater, partly because the irrigation infrastructure required is largely absent, and partly because the policy and market environments are more complex. The Green Revolution's specific contribution to the Economic Turning Point series is the most complete example of the series' central pattern, a transformative innovation that achieves its primary objective with extraordinary success, creates dependencies whose consequences compound over decades, and leaves a governance gap between the achievement and the system required to sustain it. Borlaug achieved what he set out to achieve. Approximately 1 billion people are alive who would otherwise have died. The Nobel Committee was correct, and the aquifers are depleting. The fertilizer depends on natural gas. The seeds belong to 3 corporations. The revolution that was supposed to end hunger permanently created a system that requires continuous management, and the management has not kept pace with the system's complexity. One Minnesota agronomist, 15 years in a Mexican wheat field, approximately 1 billion lives. The Nobel Peace Prize. The warning in the acceptance speech that was not fully heeded. The Punjab aquifer falling 60 centimeters per year. The Ogallala running out in 25 to 50 years. The Haber-Bosch process consuming 1 to 2% of global energy for 50% of global energy for 50% of global food production. 3 corporations controlling approximately 60% of the global commercial seed supply. The Ukraine war's fertilizer disruption producing food insecurity across 50 nations. The Banao rice terraces facing abandonment. The African Green Revolution proving harder than the Asian one. The CRISPR patent fight enclosing the next revolution before it has been deployed. The series continues next episode with the 2008 global financial crisis, the event that exposed the full fragility of the financial architecture built by every previous turning point in this series. The crisis that required approximately $10 trillion in government bailouts and stimulus. The crisis that produced the specific political conditions for every economic nationalism movement that followed it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the story doesn't end here, it evolves. The seeds are in the ground. The aquifers are being drawn down. The fertilizer ships are loading. The harvest is coming. And whether the system that produces it is sustainable, that question is still open in 2026.